Hello, everyone. This is RielCZ.
I'm TTTXYV.
Yes.
Sorry, that was overly aggressive.
And we are here in Las Vegas.
Fabulous New York.
Fabulous. Oh.
Fabulous Las Vegas. Fuck that up.
And ready to bring to you the legend of storytelling competition 915.
Dun, dun,
Dun dun dun.
I can't do a New York accent on the spot, but just so that everyone is aware, Mikey Co is canonically supposed to have a thick New York accent.
100%.
All right, so let's begin. Thank you, ladies and merfolk. You've been a wonderful audience, I told them, my fins gripping the mic for support. I'll be at the Kelp Funny Club until... For those who don't know, I'm not going to explain why that's funny.
Okay. Yes.
Those who don't know. Those who know. I'll be at the Kelp Funny Club until Wednesday, and be sure to try the spicy radish salad. Nary a fin clap could be heard among the audience, and I did my best to uphold my wavering smile as I looked at figures seated at such elegant tables. The only sound that I could pick up on was the scant clink of silverware that had, in fact, lessened as my act went on. Did I really just make an entire restaurant lose their appetite? I slid the microphone back into its place and fled the stage, grateful that the salt water all around me hid my oncoming tears. This was my first real gig as a comedian, and I'd blown it. As sure as fairyland was blown out of the sky. Too soon? What was worse, my cousin Morty had helped me get this gig in the first place, painting me in a better light than any paintbrush to his fellow staff members of Kelp. And I'd gone and flubbed it all. My swimming slowed to a crawl, right in front of the restaurant's cleaning closet. Without hesitation, I leapt in and plopped onto an upturned mop bucket, slamming the door behind me. All of the pretense was gone, and I could face the facts, and my puffy red eyes, in the dingy closet mirror. I just wasn't funny. Oh, I'd tried before, of course. Submitted every quip I had into the caption contest, whether it was a horrific pun about a Larna kin being someone's family, or some silly quip about a crisp blue tunic being crisped and not blued by a Scorchio. I've even sent a handful of funny stories into the storytelling contest. But that Aisha's sense of humor, woof, don't get me started on that. My side splitters never made the cut. I mulled over my purpose as I pushed a broom handle back and forth. Why would I try so hard to pursue a seemingly fruitless calling? That part was easy to answer. The truth is, others are drawn to those with wit and charm, especially if they can be made to laugh at their antics. I was a clumsy child, so that was easy enough back then, but now, everyone's just too serious. It's almost like one can't even make a joke anymore without losing their appetite for their honeyed horn of plenty. Making fun of myself on stage was perfect, or so I thought. I gave a long, hard sniffle, and thought long and hard, too. Maybe there was something else I could make fun of? Something most Neopians would agree on? I stopped playing with the broom handle as my eye caught a tattered Fiora Day postcard taped to the mirror. Just then, a trickle of an idea seeped into my head. Maraqua might not have found my act funny, but perhaps it was just time for a new one. There'd be lots to say about Fiora the Fairy Queen. That's for certain.
She's a perfect muse, I muttered as I departed the funny club, hardly noticing as I bowled Slapstick Steve over with one of the doors. A political figure with pink eyes and an appearance that changes so fast, they just can't keep up with her. I mean, the jokes practically write themselves. As I reached the sandy thoroughfare that would lead me back home from the funny club, I stopped and looked over my shoulder at the venue where I'd flopped my first ever gig. I reflected momentarily on the time I'd spent in the cleaning closet, and decided I never wanted to go back there. Unless, of course, I needed cleaning supplies. Heh, classic. Cupping my fins, I shouted loud enough that I was sure that everyone in my audience who doubted me could hear. Don't eat the spicy radish salad too fast, 'cause you'll need room for seconds! In the distance, several pedestrians exchanged worried looks. This is why you stay in school, Tommy, said one mother to her child. With a spring in my step, or maybe there was just a buoyancy, I swam home, waving and smiling at everyone I passed, hoping to turn at least one frown upside down. Along the way, I passed through the city square, looking with wide eyes at the ultra-cup memorabilia that adorned the plaza. What do Fairyland and its Ultra Cup team have in common? I mumbled as I walked, craning my head to look at the banners plastered on the apartment windows. I glanced around for an audience before I cackled. They both hit rock bottom a long time ago! I was opening my mouth to make a quip about Kiko Lake's team before something slapped me in the face. I knew Ellsworth had it out for me, I thought, before I realized my assailant was a mangled copy of the Neopets Times. Looks like someone wasn't happy with that horoscope. I transitioned smoothly. To my surprise, laughter rang out after I finished my set. Hope rising in my chest, I peeled the paper off my face to get a better look at where the laughter was coming from. I saw young Piel, mother in tow, pointing and laughing. Look, Ma, that man got hit in the face with something. Now, Tommy, the mother said. Remember what I told you earlier? Before I could so much as open my mouth to start a new set, the pair had swum off, and I was left alone, with only my newspaper to comfort me. Hey, at least this one was free! I joked, half because I hoped someone would laugh, and half because I wanted to comfort myself. Tough crowds all around tonight, I thought. Well, after that disgraceful side street show, having something to occupy my mind might come in handy. I looked at the Neopets Times again and found my horoscope. What do you mean? Don't let the busy chatter of the day disrupt your connection with deeper thoughts and ideas, I complained. I recalled my quest, and congratulated myself on that nice fun to disparage the Fairy Queen. I quickly skimmed through the latest edition of the Neopets Times. News usually tended to be more tragedy than comedy these days, but I was going to get today's juice on Fiora. It wouldn't be from juicing the Fairy Queen herself, after all. The Times' investigative journalists had to have some net positive benefit for society, am I right? Let's see here, I said to no one in particular as I flipped through the pages. Editorial, nothing interesting here except another problem with Mystery Pick, my joke earlier this evening. What's worse than releasing an expensive stamp through Mystery Pick? Re-releasing an expensive stamp through Mystery Pick was met with boos. Yeah, undeniably too soon. There was nothing remotely humorous in the short stories or the series. I pre-checked the comics, filled with as many 5-letter logic games, ending with a punchline, but found nothing I could directly translate to the stage. Now, normally, I didn't even touch the articles. I've read too many bad reviews in my earlier amateur gigs for that. And by bad, I mean bad. Come on, my hairstyle isn't even that relevant to my act. But I'll keep my reviews on Reviews NT article series idea for another day. I remember the worst review called my humor harmless. Mostly. If you want to laugh at Mikey you need to go back to year 1 when his jokes were even remotely relevant. Ouch, but I digress. I was on a mission, and maybe Lady Luck or Father Fate, whatever they were called, would slap me in the face for the free newspaper for a reason. You never know where you'd strike gold. Or in Shanku, where gold strike you! I quipped to the empty street. Heh, another classic. Indeed, an article by the name The Fairy Queen Conundrum caught my attention. My eyes were, non-literally, glued to the page. The article was a hard-hitting expose on the deceit and corruption surrounding Queen Fiora. Wrong, biting, and bold. The piece was absolutely brilliant and absolutely scandalous. Exactly the sort of thing I want my comedy to be. That this had been allowed to be published meant that Fairylanders weren't happy about the state of their nation. And when unhappy, what cheered Neopet more than laughing at the cause of their frustration? I laughed at my audience more than once tonight. Unfortunately, they didn't laugh back. An idea came to mind, clear as the still Nariclon water about. I needed to do 3 things to bring it to life. This couldn't wait until I got back to my one-room Neo-home. Quickly, I retrieved my quill pen from my jacket and wrote in the article. 1. Get the rights to the article from the journalist. 2. Rent the stage in Fiora's Tower, the same where Brinso holds her biennial show. And 3. From the greatest satirical one-act play that Fairyland has ever seen.
Naturally, the first step would be to find the journalist. Of course, that has its own problems. From what I was able to figure out about him, he didn't live in Morocco. As a Khoi, that was a small problem. However, I was sure I could find a way to travel on land. Of course, out of all the places in Neopia, this journalist lived in the Lost Desert. I thought a skateboard would be a decent way to travel, yet I didn't realize how cumbersome it would be to travel over sand with wheels. I should have gotten my sandboard, I muttered to myself with a chuckle. Yet another classic. After a number of hours dragging myself along the sand and complaining about how hot it was, I found myself where I believed the journalist lived. As expected, it was a lovely place. Granted, it looked more like something you'd see in Neopio Central than the Lost Desert. Then again, if you're a famous journalist, that would give you the ability to do whatever you want. I rolled up to the door and gave it a hearty knock. After a few minutes, the door opened to reveal an orange Cybunny. She had long pink hair and glasses on the bridge of her nose. She looked down at me. Huh, Khoi on a skateboard. Don't see that every day, she commented. If I may ask, why are you here? Ah, Fiora, it is an absolute pleasure to meet you, I said. I grabbed onto one of her paws and gave it a firm shake. I am a huge fan of your work. The Cybunny cracked a smile. Oh, you are? Go on. Yes, the biggest. One of your latest works inspired me so much. I could not stop reading the Fairy Queen Conundrum. And like that, the Cybunny's face deflated for a bit. She sputtered before continuing. Oh, I see. No, that's not me. I'm Rabs. That was my partner. Her smile returned, albeit one of amusement. Oh, please forgive me. I gave a deep bow. I'm sure your work is lovely as well. Well, it is, when I can get past the writer's block. Rabs leaned on the doorframe. So you want to speak to the famed Neopet who wrote the Fairy Queen Conundrum? Yes, please. 1 second. Rabs turned into the house and took a deep breath before shouting, Piel, the door's for you! Within a minute, an Alienatia strolled up to Rabs. His fur was yellow and his eyes were brown. On top of his head, covering his black hair, was a hat that was adorned with more pins than there were stars in the sky. From a quick glance, his hat contained a talia pin and a soup fairy fin, and 2 carry pins, besides which a frowny face was scribbled onto the fabric in black marker. Some dark circles were under his eyes, likely from working too late. All the qualities of a star. I am here, the Asia, Piel, as Rabs had mentioned, said. His voice was grandiose, as if he knew how much of a wonder he was. He looked down at me. The name's Piel Cazari. What do you want?
I cut to the chase. I wasn't here to sightsee or make new friends. I want to become a star, like Piel Cazari. And the first step in my foolproof plan was getting the rights to his article. At first, my voice caught in my throat, either of his nervousness or perhaps the dry climate of the Lost Desert. But after filling my mind with images of myself in Fairyland upstaging Brinso with a one-act play to remember, I found my words again. Good thing, too, that was how I made my Neopoints. Alternatively, I could have begged Morty for leftovers from kelp. For some reason, so few guests ever left with leftovers. No wonder they were called leftovers. I'm a big fan of the Fairy Queen Conundrum, I began. It was brilliant, it was bold, it was beautiful. I pretended to sniff an incipient tear. That might be a useful skill later on, I reminded myself. That's why I want to turn it into a play. Rab's eyes widened as she turned to look at Piel. Ooh, a play? But a play? Where? As it turned out, it wasn't just Rabs and Piel who lived there. A hissy slid in between them and gave me a cheery wave. Who's the new kid? A fan of Piel's, the Sly Bunny answered. He gets them every day, especially since that article on Queen Flora was published. Truly, my quest to discover the real story behind Flora was a success. Before I could mention that I thought of that pun first, even though I was likely wrong about that, I quickly explained the reason for this particular quest. Which is why I want to turn it into a play. I want the rights to it. How much do I have to pay you, Mr. Cazari? Please. Piel is fine. The Asia punctuated that last word with a yawn. He's probably working hard on a sequel. The King-Ru controversy, perhaps? Yeah, about that, the hissy interrupted. Oh, almost forgot. I'm Tiffany Triumphalante Torchbringer Xylobar ye 5th, but you can call me TTTXYV for short. Anyway, Piel already sold the rights to someone else. Piel frowned at the hissy. You mean you sold the rights to my article? For what, a few Neopean food tokens? Those tokens are bound to become valuable someday. It was an investment, she responded hotly. Besides, your article is in good hands. Is it? Piel and Rabs asked at the same time. I was too dumbfounded to say anything. The rights weren't with Piel Cazari anymore. Or Tina Fairy Tennis Balls. TTXYF, rather. My plan was scuttled before it could even reach step 1. My beautiful satirical play, my comedic career, everything was crumbling before my eyes like a sandcastle at the mercy of the waves. Again, I managed to pick up my words from where I dropped them. So who do you sell the rights to? I asked. I was so ready to throw a hissy fit. That joke would have been funnier if the rights to the Fairy Queen Conundrum were still within my reach. TTXYF tapped her chin with her finger. Oh yeah, it was some royal Zafara, all uppity and carrying a NeoQuest 2 map notebook. She said she was going to turn the Fairy Queen Conundrum into a board game, just like NeoQuest. Rabs gasped. What? You mean you sold the rights to? That's right, TTXYF grinned. I groaned inwardly. Why hadn't I thought of that pun? I sold the rights to the eccentric Neopean Times series writer, precious Kad Itch.
This is really beginning to feel like an overdrawn, unwelcome side quest, I muttered as I dragged myself into Fairy City atop my very noticeable skateboard. What's next? Someone leaping out at us and saying they need our help gathering their 100 baba? At least who we're looking for lives near enough to the place you said you're planning to perform, Rabs murmured thoughtfully from beside me. After I had managed to pry the location of this precious Kad Itch from TTTXYF, the orange Bunny had been ever so kind as to offer to accompany me. It should make things easier on you. Yeah, if I had any idea where anything was, I'm like a fish out of water when it comes to these parts. I would have found my pun funnier if I wasn't collectively losing my mind over how difficult the first step of my plan was turning out to be. I hope the other parts wouldn't be so frustrating. I'm sure it'll work out, Rabs said encouragingly. I'm certainly excited to see your play. Is that why you came? I asked, trying to find something to talk about other than the difficulties I was facing. Well, Rabs suddenly looked rather embarrassed. That, and I was just wondering what it looks like to perform. Someday I want to do a live reading of my pieces in front of a crowd. Her embarrassment shifted to wistfulness. Piel is always getting fans coming to our place. It'd be nice if someone came for me, because they liked my work. Why haven't you then? I asked, stopping my very tiring pulling on the skateboard to look up at her. Is it really difficult to get the stage or something? Oh, please don't let that be the case. I've had enough trouble with my career already. No, Rabs said, thankfully. At least, I don't think so. I'm just a little crowd shy is all, she sighed. Gets in the way of a lot, to be honest. I felt a little guilty for that, especially because of how I'd mistaken her for her partner before. We continued on in silence, the bustling of the crowd filling the quiet between us. It felt as if we had been walking in circles for ages before I finally recognized a landmark from TTTXYF's description of Precious Kad Itch's location. I started forward in excitement, almost toppling off my skateboard as I pulled myself faster and faster in that direction. I could only get so far, however, before I was stopped in my tracks by someone standing nearby. Someone who, with a start, I realized I recognized. It was Queen Fiora, standing meters away from where I believed Precious Kad Itch to live.
And right beside her, seemingly confirming that this was, in fact, Kad's home, was the pompous Fiora herself. For the last time, Fiora! Get off my property! Kad objected, folding her arms. I have level 3 lawyerbot training. I can and will get a restraining order against you. The Fairy Queen just smiled wanly. Oh, come now, precious Kad. I'm sure we can work out a deal for those rights. If you were in my situation, reputation tarnished and facing severe backlash from our citizens, other Neopean leaders, and the Neopean community at large, I'm sure you'd try to buy the rights back and bury the story. Her smile became oddly regal. The Zafara groaned. Insomuch as I'm sympathetic to your plight, which honestly is not very much, the expose is too good not to be shared via some medium. Also, I've already started working on my board game. She held up a small Piel figurine, a violin-shaped loaf of stale bread in one hand and a deviled egg goalie in the other, looking otherwise incredibly journalistic and tired. Kad beamed. I painted him myself. It was here that Fiora glanced over and realized Rabs and I were standing there. What do you want? She scowled. Can't you see we're busy? Oh, I said dumbly, at a loss for words. Rabs gently pushed me forward. Actually, I continued, finding my footing, thankfully on the ground rather than my skateboard, much like a very slapstick, and that was not the time. My name is Mikey Ko, and here is Rabs. Fiora and Kad need no introduction. I, too, am here to try to purchase the rights. The others listened intently. I wanted to explain that I was a comedian, and after reading the Fairy Queen conundrum, I had the brilliant idea to turn it into a satirical play about Fairyland's newly notorious leader. I performed at the stage in Fiora's tower, no less. Kad laughed in my face, and I frowned. Really? That's what you tend to do with it? She asked cynically. Hey, I think it will work well, I said nonchalantly, trying not to let my hurt feelings show. Do you even have any actors? Zafara inquired, raising her eyebrow in what I hoped was curiosity rather than credulity. I trailed. Then Rabs stepped forward with more confidence than I expected she would exude. Yeah, I'm planning to act in it. She gave a small shrug and then apologized for being so forward. I do enjoy tabletop role-playing games. She continued, a hair and hair, because she was a side bunny, more sheepishly. And that can't be different from acting. Kad harumphed, though the mention of hiring a tabletop role-player as an actor did seem to pique her interest and lend some credibility to my dream. Though in retrospect, of course it would have, concerning Zafara hoped to produce a board game with the play's rights. Playwrights. Different enough from TTXYF's clip. I might have to use it somewhere later. Unlike Kad, Fiora seemed greatly interested. You said your name is Mikey, right? And you're a comedian. I affirmed this with an over-exaggerated bow. The very same. At your service, m'lady. Fiora's face broke into a grin. I've heard of you. I gave a surprised smile. Wait, really? I squeaked. Holy Fiora, was Fiora actually a fan of mine? My eyes glistened. Of course you have. I stated, any hint of modesty evaporated like the sea in the desert. I am something of a legend. Or at least a riot, Fiora commented. I have a close associate, Max Nacaber, who was in the audience at the Kelp of the night and sent me this video. She published her Zibly phone 14 Plus SE, and my goofy grin slowly morphed into a dismayed gape. What's better than just sitting there? My voice, from the atrocious Kelp set, sounded over the speaker. Just sitting there, eating a potato! And then there was 7 seconds of silence, followed by me saying, Ha ha! That's more of a joke for Thursday night. Kad just glared, and I had no idea what she was thinking. I don't like this burst technology, Neopia, she finally huffed, folding her arms. Fiora put away her cell phone. Anyway, Mikey, she continued through her sickening, saccharine smile, I have full confidence anything you touch will be complete disaster. She gazed at me with a demeanor of chillingly raw thrill. "Which would be absolutely perfect. After all, a train wreck performance would have my citizens lose trust in that dastardly article, and by extension, more faith in me would be restored." She pointed to herself and smiled with self-satisfaction. "I wouldn't even have to look suspicious by bringing anything. It would all be on you." I frowned and gave a single nod. Clearly today was beat up on Mikey's feelings day. "I have so much confidence in your lack of abilities, in fact," Farah continued, "that if you manage to secure the rights, I will let you rent the stage of my tower for free." She handed me the business card of one elliiebell. "She manages the bookings. I'll get you in touch with her." Well, at least the rest was a pleasant surprise. I would have to replace rent the stage in Fiora's tower with proof you are wrong. "You have a deal, Fiora," I smiled determinedly. Kad gave a yawn of seeming disinterest, but there was a hint of excitement behind her eyes. Whether she also wanted to act in the play, or also wanted to see me fail, I wasn't sure. It could have been anything. "All right, I admit your idea may hold more merit than first I believed," Xylobar conceded, and then she grinned widely. "And I always do love a creative contest. How about we have a battle for the rights?" The first thing that came to mind was a rap battle, but those were too last decade. "How about an art contest?" Rabs opined. I had a good laugh at that one. There is one fairy mohawk piece using traditional art I've been trying to get into the art gallery for months. I've always said to get in when hogs fly. Ha. Another classic. "How about whoever has the highest ranked caption contest caption for this month?" I asked, but no one, including me, frankly, wanted to exhaust a few days' time and energy for the caption to be released and especially voted upon. "A NeoQuest 1 trivia contest, and when we invariably tie because they let you win, an epic showdown of a NeoQuest 2 trivia contest," Kad said with a growing mad grin, though his prospect didn't seem all too agreeable with anyone else. Fiora snapped her fingers. "Why, I've got the perfect contest for you two," she started.
"I want both of you," Fiora began, "to write a response to the Fairy Queen conundrum, debunking and disproving all of Piel Cazari's claims in that article." I could feel my stomach fall, and it would have fallen many more miles if Fairyland had still been up in the sky. While I was slowly gaining confidence in my oddly specific skill of finding puns in my inner monologue to use for any future comedic acts, Fiora's opinion had shot down my confidence yet again. Not only that, I never considered myself a writer. Otherwise, I would have attempted a comedy article column or some sort of funny series for the Neopian Times. And now I was going up against precious Kad Itch, whom TTTXYF had described as an eccentric series writer on top of creating board games. Forget the side quest, this was already the boss battle, and Kad probably knew she was the boss. I wanted to protest, but just as I had opened my mouth to say that this contest was not as perfect as Fiora said it was, Kad was quicker. "Challenge accepted," she declared, punching a fist into the air. "Now, Queen Fiora, since this was your idea, surely you wouldn't mind if I interviewed you for my article? Yeah." I have never been so eloquent in my entire life. Thankfully, Rabs was there to save the day. "Mikey's right," the Side Bunny said. "If he and Kad will be writing articles in response to the Fairy Queen conundrum, they should be allowed to interview you. After all, wouldn't you want to make sure that these articles are good for your reputation, Your Majesty?" Fiora tapped her cheek in thought. I crossed my fingers, rather fins, behind my back. Kad pretended to walk her Piel figurine in the air. "Very well," she finally said, and I breathed, such a long sigh of relief that for a moment I forgot that I was a koi. "Because precious Kad was the first to ask me if she could interview me, she gets to speak to me first. I will find you when we are done, Mikey Co., and should you win, I look forward to seeing your show crash and burn while my reputation finally gains a second life." I wish I had a second life, too, but unfortunately, this wasn't a game. This was real life. Instead of returning home to Morocco, I took a detour with Rabs back to the Lost Desert. The journey didn't take long. It only took 3 well-placed asterisks in a long-form narrative, one might say. "Did you get the rights from precious Kad Itch? Tutti Frutti Tortellini, never mind, TTTXYF asked as Rabs and I were admitted back into their not-so-humble home. "No," I said, not without exasperation. Fiora wanted the rights to Piel's article for herself, but instead she's making me battle Kad for them. I have to write an article debunking the Fairy Queen conundrum to win. Piel raised his eyebrows. "What? But the Fairy Queen conundrum is the true story about Fiora. What is there to debunk?" He spread his arms and shrugged. "She's not as perfect as everyone thinks, and my article proves it." "Well, she wants to precisely be as perfect as everyone thinks," Rabs said, flopping into an armchair and letting out a sigh. Heh, a sigh bunny, one might say. "How good is Kad as a writer?" I asked, a little sad that I couldn't dwell on that pun. It was quite pun important, now that my play and the article rights rested on whether or not I could beat precious Kad Itch at beating Piel Cazari. She has a very long, ongoing series in the Neopian Times entitled An Adventurer's Adventure, said Piel, yawning. I was unsure whether he yawned because he had little interest in Kad's writing, or if he was still sleepy from some more hardcore article writing, or perhaps both. But she isn't known for articles that aren't about board games. I'm not known for articles at all, I answered. I didn't have enough comedic article to fill 1,000 words in the Neopian Times. Anyway, Mr. Piel. Just Piel is fine, the Asia said, waving a hand dismissively. Though there was something about how he waved that hand which reminded me of a star waving away extra, unneeded attention. Here I was, a washed-up, that's quite funny considering I'm a literal koi-out-of-water comedian, about to ask this Neopian Times star for a huge favor, all so my plan could come to fruition, and, more importantly, so I could prove Fiora wrong. Her and her stupid accent. Yes, I wanted to prove her wrong. Prove that I was more than just some comedian moms made an example of to ensure their kids stayed in school. Prove that I deserve the rights to the article more than some crazy series writer/board game maker. Prove that I could do this, even though my heart hammering in my chest told an entirely different story. Piel, I need your help.
And so with that, Piel and I went through an excellent training montage to learn how to write an article. I suffered paper cuts, ink spots, writer's block, and some hoops with crumpled up failed drafts all in the span of 5 minutes. But by the end of our montage, I had done it. I had graduated from a noob to a novice. Now at least I had something resembling a chance. So what's your plan? Asked Rabs. Oh, right, the plan. I've been so focused on learning citations, style guides, and Oxford commas. Oh, look, that was just one now. I'd forgotten about the actual plan for the article on Fiora. Well, it has to be true, and it has to be positive. I thought out loud, hoping that nobody would notice that I didn't have a clue what I was doing. Go on. Piel expectantly looked at me like I was a proud master watching his apprentice. So, we have to write things that people like about her, I improvised. It was like being back in school writing an essay for a subject I didn't study for. But the article has to debunk the gunk that's already been written, Rabs pointed out. I was trapped in a dead end with my improvisation. I wrote myself into my first corner. How was I going to kickflip my way out of this one? Out of panic, I did just that. I had a sweet kickflip on my skateboard. Fin flip? Kick? Fin? That's still going to work on later. I did the trick like I had done so many times before instead of studying for my tests. That's a brilliant idea, Piel exclaimed. It gave him a confused look. I hadn't said anything. It's a classic technique, rarely practiced by the masters, but in this situation, it could totally work. Instead of debunking the truth, we just write a fluff piece that distracts people from the truth. Yeah, exactly. Wow them! I agreed, not fully knowing what technique he was talking about, but I did know that it was time for a montage. But this time, the montage was to get back to Maracua. It was almost time for our turn to do the interview, and I needed to look my best for interviewing royalty. A few jump cuts of me trying to clean up my tiny abode and an outfit try-on session. Piel and Rabs both directed 3 of them before finally giving a thumbs up on the last one. I was ready. I could sense the air change as the city fell silent upon setting Fiora at my doorstep. Everyone was holding their breath. I let her in. Hello there! Come in! Can I offer you a glass of water underwater? I chuckled to myself, trying to be polite. She didn't laugh. Kad's interview took almost 2 hours. Very thorough. Mostly about stat blocks and backstory. I didn't even know that I'd once fought a horde of red drakes before, but she assures me that she saw it happen in her games before. Fleur looked confused, as if she doubted her own memories. Well, I have some hard-hitting questions to help set the record straight. I pulled out my trusty notebook for writing down my best ideas. Ideas like broad chessboard and rubber chicken with a pulley in the middle. I turned to a fresh page and started my inquiry. What did you have for breakfast this morning? Fairy pancakes, she plainly answered with precision and confidence. I scribbled it down as fast as I could. Describe your favorite chair. Cushioning enough to cup the buttocks, but firm enough to support the lumbar. No rollers and a high back. What is your opinion on doggle foxes? They are adorable. Favorite room in your house? When there's not some ferret-like creature in my castle shouting fun facts about crenellations and crown molding, I like my bedroom the most because everyone loves a good nap. Favorite flavor of pie? Cherry, does this have a point? Fear was growing concerned by the questions. Just trying to figure out which flavor you would like to get pied in the face with during the play, I joked. Her glare told me not to do that, but I wrote the idea down in my notebook anyway as a maybe. Just gathering the facts, ma'am. Now, what do you put on your toast? Butter. Okay, thanks. I think I have everything. I snapped my notebook shut and started to lead Fiora to the door. Already? But you didn't even ask me about the things in the article. I don't need to. I can see the headline now. Fiora, queen of the people. Likes puppies and buttered bread like everyone else. I could see the newspaper spinning in my head already. Now all I had to do was write.
And right I did. Channeling my inner Piel, as much as haste as his brilliance, I assembled all the disparate thought threads into something coherent. And I found it much easier to do so now than a few months ago when last I unsuccessfully entered the storytelling competition. Clearly, I had progressed as an author. Later that evening, I finished my article, written with my own quill pen on some standard waterproof parchment, TM. Grinning, I penned the title of my masterpiece using my cursive that was as flowy as the water currents. There is no conundrum. Fiora, queen of the people. The next morning, I grabbed my skateboard and decided I didn't feel like traveling more than it would take to write a sentence and simply wrote my way to the lost desert. I was greeted at the door to Piel's home, seemingly even more extravagant than it appeared yesterday, by rabid fangirl Tierney Templebell's Thriftweed XYF. How's your article writing going? She asked me with growing excitement. Did you finish? I most certainly did, I confirmed with a wide smile. I swung by here so Piel could give it a glance before I show it to Fiora. Piel, door, she yelled in a way reminiscent of Rabs. Maybe the Aisha was simply hard of hearing, despite his 4 long ears. Coming, Piel called back with the intonations of someone who was very satisfied with what they had accomplished. Say, TTTXYF continued slyly, did you want to buy some Neopian food tokens off me? She grinned like she was selling snake oil, because she was a hissy. I gently refused her offer. I heard the market had crashed. But not before I published my latest article about my tokens debacle, Piel greeted with a sly smile. If my Neo home looks bigger, that's because it is. Now, my protege, the Aisha started warmly. He embraced me by putting a short arm about my shoulder, and with his other he snatched the parchment from my fins and swiftly opened it in what seemed like a well-practiced motion. What have you written? His eyes darted back and forth faster than a montage. Meanwhile, Rabs came up to us and wrapped an arm around her partner's shoulder. So, is it good? She asked him, raising her orange floppy ears in expectation. A smile spread across Piel's face as he finished reading. It's brilliant, he commented, his voice thick with praise. I mean, it's neither bold nor hard-hitting, but it makes Fiora, his throat scowled at the mention, seem like some simple saint, and nothing contradicts my article because, well, there is such little substance in yours. Well, that seemed to be a compliment, and he beamed at me. TTTXYF joined us to complete a circle of 4, and we all grinned at each other. In fact, the Aisha continued, it's such a fluffy piece, I think that's what I should nickname you. And from that day forward, Piel, and later others, called me Flufflepiece. Before I had departed en route to Fairyland, I noticed Piel had hanging on his wall a framed photo of himself beside the storyteller Aisha. They appeared to be at a haunted house function, and though he seemed considerably less tired, but even more disheveled, she looked immaculate. You know her personally? I asked him, again awestruck. Of course I do, he answered with a dismissive hand wave, like this was entirely obvious. I first met her at the house in this photo, the Aisha continued in a nostalgic tone. She is one fickle lover. Of the arts, he added. And then Piel frowned, which seemed to age him a few years. Beware of her. She can get vindictive if you start to mess with her stories. Though tension filled the air, he quickly broke it with a guffaw that erased his temporary aged beauty. Or at least bemused, but I'm sure that's nothing to worry about. I laughed alongside him, bidding farewell to what felt like my third home. My second home was, and always would be, a secret. I ventured to the hidden tower. Kad and I submitted our articles to the Fairy Queen, who promptly gave them to her associate, Max Nacaber, to judge. Max was, apparently, a major editor for the Neopian Times, and less biased than I am, Fiora assured us, though more so Kad in retrospect, giving Fiora still had zero faith in my capabilities. The pompous Far and I were given rooms and asked to stay through the night, apparently because Max did their best work at odd hours, and we would be told the results come morning. Though Kad and I were, thankfully, placed in separate rooms, we did share supper together, a rather unfunny, obviously unfrozen meal and a dessert of floating cinnamon toast topped with whipped cream. Though we were not wholly cordial with each other, there was no sense of unease between the Neopian Times series superstar and myself. After all, Kad knew she was the better writer, and I made no attempts to rebut this fact. She even showed me her latest proposed to the Fairy Queen Conundrum board game figurine, an earth fairy with a pipe and whose dress was a plant with 7 leaves, and we exchanged some tips about the poetry contest. After supper, I went straight to bed. I'd had a long day and was very tired. Just as I was falling asleep, however, I saw some sort of long, slender, furry thing high on the opposite wall of my room. A pet, perhaps? Maybe a dandan? And then it started barking something about the castle's architecture. "You must be that ferret boy Fiora talked about," I started with a groan. "Yes, but I'm also the mail person, and I have mail for you," he continued with a grin. I frowned. Some part of me had always known he was here to deliver mail. And chain mail, because of his incessant comments on castle architecture. Another classic. I just hoped he wasn't here to deliver my monthly edition of Getting Wet and Enjoying It outside Morocco. It wasn't a well-appreciated periodical, and was bound to give me some strange looks if I was seen carrying the magazine around. "It's a standard Neo mail," he said, allaying my concerns. He went away and left the letter. I'd read it tomorrow. The next morning after breakfast, during which Kad discussed her previous evening's dream of Jajora and Tarask being allies, and I briefly brought up my dream of a couple peculiar mohawks, the Zafara and I sat at the large desk in Fiora's main office. Max sat at the other side of the desk, facing us, and the Fairy Queen stood a few strides away, near the room's entrance. "I have reviewed your work," began the Shoiru. "Both pieces are good." They smiled and looked between Kad and I. "But this is a contest, and one must be better." They turned to face the Zafara. "Kad, your writing style is expressive, eloquent, and articulate. It flows, it's a brush, it paints a picture. You paint Fiora as a vanquisher, as a source of good against evil, and I feel like I'm really there, witnessing the battle." They grinned. "And that legendary action you gave her to request help from other Neopians was just brilliant." I felt a pain in my stomach. Had I lost? And more than that, was the quest pun so unoriginal that everyone had thought of it at some point? I stole a glance at Kad, who was just smiling with self-satisfaction. "But," Max continued, their mouth becoming more neutral, "that's the thing about it. It all seems too, well, legendary. Like it's just a story, or a made-up game. It seems too disconnected from the world, and Fiora's PR team needs something grounded in reality." Kad started to protest that her article was a work of art, and entirely historical at that, but Max raised a paw to stop her mid-sentence. The Zafara just glared daggers. "And you, Mikey," the Shoiru said as they turned to me, "you have such a raw, well, truth to your words. It's not flashy, it's not lofty, it's not even well written in some places." They leaned in close. "But it's real. I read this, and I can nod and say, yup, Fiora loves doggle foxes. And I do too, so she can't be all bad." They smiled. "It will be absolutely perfect for PR, and will be published in the next edition of the Times." They grinned at me. "You should consider writing for the NT more often." Kad was seething now. Holy Fiora, had I actually won? "Well, I am something of a playwright," I quipped, with much more charisma than that line deserved. No, that wasn't quite the right time for that possible pun. Fiora approached us. "Congrats, Mikey. You win." She went to shake my fin. I was just flabbergasted. "You!" Kad pointed an aggressive finger at me, and I could almost see the anime anger mark just below the brim of her feathered hennin. But then she became oddly calm, and even gave a hint of a smile. "Until we cross paths again, Mikey-ko." She forcefully shook my fin, slammed her PL-signed "De Rights" legal document down on the desk, and then skipped out of the room. Well, part of me hoped we would cross paths in her acting in my play. The rest of me knew she'd probably just write a negative review on it for the Times. The rest of me, well, I don't want to think about those possibilities. I hurriedly picked up "De Rights" and placed it in my jacket. Max got up, and, bowing us adieu, left Fiora and I alone in the office. "You have 3 more days, and then it's show time," the Fairy Queen said with a wild grin. That caught me off guard, and I sputtered, "Wait, what?" Fiora gave a staccato bark of a laugh. "Your play is supposed to fail, remember?" She looked at me square in the eyes, which is admittedly an odd phrase considering eyes are circular-shaped, and I could feel her teasing malevolence. "I'm not just going to go easy on you." She snapped her fingers. "I've already informed Ella, and as we speak there are posters featuring you and the conundrum being printed all up over Fairyland." Fiora sashayed to the room's exit. She was the real winner here, and she knew it. "Good luck, Mikey," she finished with a level voice before she shut the door. Well, I had 3 days to get this play together, and heck, I could and would get this play together. I was more than capable. I had somehow defeated precious Kad, and was on the cusp of comedic brilliance, on the cusp of proving I was better than a bad example, on the cusp of another amazing montage or time skip or... And then I remembered the letter I'd received from the previous night. I removed it from my jacket and opened it. It was from the storyteller. Frowning, I read it aloud to the empty room. "Dear Mikey, I see what you're doing. Don't get me wrong, I'm having a lot of fun, and you are too. But as you continue and eventually finish the plot, no more montages, and use time skip sparingly. Seriously, you received an extra week to tell the story, so tell the darned story. I look forward to seeing your play. With love, Storyteller. Feeling a bit uneasy, I put the letter back in my pocket. I'd have to go and retrieve Rabs to play one of the leading roles, and travel to the Lost Desert the old-fashioned way, it seemed. But I had another stop I wanted to make first.
This was no time for montages, time skips, or story breaks. But this was certainly the time to cut to the chase as I chased my 3-day deadline. Steps 1 and 2 of my foolproof plan, well, I thought it was foolproof until the wild mallard chase for the rights were out of the way, but the third and final step was the true boss battle. And as with any boss battle, I need everything and everyone I could find in order to win. Unfortunately, a stash of healing potions simply won't cut it. So without further ado, I returned to the Kelp Funny Club. Because I only had 3 days to get this play together, I had no time to pay attention to Slapstick Steve, who was once again on door duty, which meant I let the door hit him on my way in. Sorry, Slapstick Steve. I consciously ducked my head to avoid meeting the eyes of any Kelp patrons who may or may not recognize me from my first gig there. I could have sworn that I saw Tommy Little Piel and his mom, who always told him to stay in school and never do, well, whatever the heck Mikey Crow was always doing. In any case, they weren't folks I was looking for. Mikey, where have you been? I can only make so many alibis for you not showing up for your shows, you know. Yeah, I'd gotten too busy with my own show that I failed to show up for my own shows. With a mild pang in my stomach, I realized I may be saying elliiebell to my job, and if my play went just as Fiora wanted it to, I'd have nothing at the end. Except maybe my Neopets Times article. Never mind that it probably wouldn't give me a prize beyond a new trophy for my cabinet. Precious Kad will just have to write more of an adventurous adventure, or whatever. Hello, Maraqua to Mikey, Morty waved his fin in front of my face. Please tell me you're here for your shift. Please tell me I'm done making excuses. Where were you? I blinked. Morty, my cousin, was normally good-natured flotsam, but today he was naturally quite annoyed with me. Well, it's a long story, and if I tell you now, it will become an even longer story. I don't have enough time. I've only got 3 days to pull off a play I have in mind. I got the rights to the Fairy Queen Conundrum, and for his permission to perform it as a Planner Tower. I'm really sorry, Morty, but I think this might be my real big break, and Morty looked at me like I had told the story anyway, despite telling him it was a long story, which I just did. Mikey, he said slowly, massaging his ample forehead. What is this? The storytelling competition? You've got an audience waiting. Oh, right, the audience that had lost its appetite the last time I was on stage. Wait, you want me to get on stage? Of course I do. This is your job. Yeah, but... I rubbed the back of my head and whispered, That's not why I'm here. Morty, thanks for helping me get my first gig, but maybe the Kelp Funny Club isn't for me, and I really am sorry that I hadn't been showing up. Now I felt like I had just lost my appetite. While running after the rights to Piel's article and managing to score the opportunity to perform in Fiora's Tower, I'd forgotten all about Morty. Poor Morty. Covering for me while I was too busy writing an article interviewing Fiora about doggle foxes and buttered toasts. Then an idea hit me. It hit me so hard I took a step back. Mikey, what's wrong? Morty asked, his forehead creasing like, well, the balled-up drafts of my article battle with Precious Kad Itch. Nothing. I shook my head. Actually, I was about to get on stage. Forget losing my appetite. I now felt like my stomach had disappeared, or I had left with Fiora. But when I swallowed, I was fairly sure my stomach was still there, so I got onto the stage of the Kelp Funny Club. When the audience saw me, the atmosphere suddenly felt like a scoop of kelp cinnamon ice cream. Cold and unusual, though certainly not worth traveling all over Neopets for. Good afternoon, ladies and gents, I said, gripping the microphone as it were my lifeline. Sorry I'm late. I just flew in from Fairyland, and boy, my arms are tired. I shut my eyes briefly. I half expected the silence, punctuated only by awkward, scattered laughter. I just met with Fiora, you know, the Fairy Queen. As in, featured in the Fairy Queen Conundrum. She's not the perfect queen everyone thinks. I barreled on, fueled by my desire to make her eat her words of my act failing, as one eats a triple chocolate shell. As expected, she didn't say anything about the Fairyland water crisis, or the evil Fuzzles outbreak, or even the whereabouts of the grass fairy. The half-hearted chuckles became a ripple of whispers. I knew they were likely only talking about Piel's article, not me, which was both comforting and not so comforting. I decided to go for my big finish. Well, all these Fiora conspiracies are about to come to life, I declared, pulling the rights out of my jacket pocket. I was about 75% certain they were waterproof. because I got the rights to turn Piel Cazari's explosive article into a real bomb of a play. Hang on. When everyone says that something bombed, they meant it was a flop, right? Okay, poor choice of words there. Judging from how this Dretsum stared at me with a copy of the Neopean Times on his table, I wasn't the only one who thought so. I mean, the good kind of bomb. I'm gonna hold the play in 3 days in Farrah's Tower. I'm gonna need your help, because I can't act out all of the other parts, make the props, set up the stage, and work for the lights all the same time. What am I, a Kraken? I laughed softly, awkwardly, wondering if I should have just led this with my spicy radish salad joke. Which is why I stand before you here today to ask you, who's with me?
The entire club was silent. All eyes were on me. I would feel the sweat dripping from my brow if I weren't underwater. I want to do it, a young voice called out from the crowd. I scanned the crowd before I saw the source was a young Piofin. Tommy, that was his name. Tommy, you're not going to go off with some stranger for a play, the mother scolded. But Ma, I want to help the funny man. The funny man. My heart swelled at the compliment. At the very least, I hoped it was a compliment. Well, unless otherwise stated, it was a compliment. The Jetsam with that copy of the Neopean Times looked at the kid, then back at me. Your silly idea sounds interesting, kid. Maybe it'd be worth going along with. Slowly but surely, the entire club began to murmur about this play. The murmurs turned to chatter. The chatter turned to cheers. I had my support. And I didn't even have to promise everyone a 50% stake of the proceeds, which had been my backup plan. Through another overly long montage, I gathered enough skateboards for the denizens of Morocco to follow me through Neopia. During the entire montage, I had this uneasy feeling as if someone were watching me. Every time I led my crew through some land or explained my play, it always felt like one extra set of eyes was part of the audience. Maybe the storyteller really was watching me. Storyteller? More like a story watcher. I led my crew all the way to Fairyland, to the gates of Fiora's castle. After giving my clearance to the guards, and filling out a lot of paperwork for my few dozen followers, I led everyone to the front entrance. To my surprise, there was already a small group sitting at the entrance. I had to rub my eyes to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from all the skateboarding I'd been doing. There they were, Rabs, Piel, Kad, Max, Tiffany trumpeting three-wood xylophone, ye fifth. They were sitting in a circle around a map full of, admittedly impressively decorated miniature statues. Kad was up and about, motioning greatly with her arms and describing something I had no context whatsoever for. The Zafara stopped her ramblings and looked at me as I approached, everyone else soon following. Wait, you all are still here? I asked, slowing my roll down to a meager crawl, as not to roll over the map. Of course, I would never want to miss my magnum opus on the grandest stage in Neopia, Piel explained. And I was willing to wait however long I needed to see your production. That and this combat encounter is taking much longer than I anticipated, Kad added. It always takes longer than anticipated, Rabs continued. TTTXYV looked over my large group of skateboarding followers. You gathered yourself quite a crew. Do you need our help preparing them for the show? No, I went over everything in a montage. I stood up as straight as I could and pounded a fin to my chest. We're as ready as we could ever be. As I pounded my chest, I could feel my heart sink into a whirlpool. I wanted this play to go well. Piel's article was a work of pure genius. It deserved as much justice as possible. Yet Fiora wanted the play to fail. If the play actually went well, I would be in royal trouble. Royal. There was only one way this play could go, and I was determined to make that happen. Well then, Max declared. They stood up and brushed themselves off. Kad, I do love this so far, but I think we all need a break. Don't you think? I suppose so. Kad picked up the miniatures from the map. Please remember where you all are for next week. I won't even remember what class I'm playing next week, TTTXYV said. I rolled my skateboard forward and turned so I could face everyone. The small group of writers I had grown to be friends with. The Moroccan citizens on skateboards I had only met one montage ago. I stood up as tall as I could on my skateboard and loudly cleared my throat to grab their attention. That feeling of extra eyes was on me again. Maybe the storyteller could feel that I was going to make my way into another montage. Not this time. Thank you all for coming here. Your support means the absolute world to me. I would not be where I'm at without all of you. I turned towards Fiora's castle. It is here the first run of the Fiora conundrum will be performed. My life's work, Piel interrupted. Shh, he's having a moment, Rabs scolded while nudging his side. I nodded towards Rabs and continued. Tonight is the night that will change all of our lives. Now come with me and let's perform a show like nobody has ever seen before.
By the time we got backstage, we could already hear the buzzes of excitement coming from the audience. And not just buzzes, but quickles and hissies and earballs too, I noted, peeking out from behind the stage's plush red curtain as the assembly gathered, presumably to be entertained by the one and only Mikey Co. Or, well, by Mikey Co and the crew, aka the Funny Club Ensemble. I'd have to work on that later. Drawing a deep breath, I looked back at the writers that had supported me in my quest to gain the rights. Piel, who had previously been looking over my hastily written script, with Rabs flashing me a thumbs up, and Rabs grinned to allay my nerves. Even Kad, whom I'd fought toe-to-toe, fin-to-toe, in Flora's contest, looked on with interest at the motley crew of actors I'd managed to find. TTTXYF wasn't looking at anything but her phone, squinting intently at numbers and lines flashing across the screen. Any last-minute suggestions? I whispered at them. To my surprise, TTTXYF piped up. I'd like to play the Grass Fairy. A pause as she looked distastefully at her phone. It's about time I saw green somewhere. Wait, we're not using asterisks anymore. Within a few minutes, everyone had gotten ready. I ran a final costume check and gave everyone assurances that they'd do great in their roles, even if I didn't feel confident in my own performance. Before I had time to worry too much, it was showtime. I made my way to the front of the backstage. A mic was already set up for me there, nodding at Kad, who had graciously volunteered as stage manager, when I was ready for her to pull the curtains back. Man, I sighed as the audience slowly came into view, squinting slightly as the spotlight hit me. I'm not just sure if any of you have set up a play before, but it's hard work. I paused just long enough to gulp. I mean, I feel like a total fish out of water here. There was a smattering of laughter, but for the most part, the auditorium was silent, waiting for the real show. But I won't go on about that much, I continued. After all, what are we waiting for? Hit the lights! As the spotlight faded, I ran backstage, a smile on my face, but not in my heart. I mean, I'd probably be at the doctor if there was a smile in my heart, I reflected, laughing at another classic. Splendid introduction, Mikey, Piel said, walking over to give me a pat on the back. I'll have you know that I laughed heartily at your introductory set. You did? Kad asked. It's okay if you didn't, I responded quickly to Kad, smile unwavering. Those jokes, much like spicy radish salad, were only appetizers for the show to come. I didn't mention that they were uneaten appetizers, but the truth of it weighed heavily on my mind. After all this time, was I still unfunny? Did anyone here truly like me, or were they all gathered to watch what was ultimately Piel's masterpiece? I tried not to think about what it would mean, if that were true. Instead, I pointed a fin toward a path that would take us to our reserved seats in the audience. Without further ado, let's go watch the production. I think you mean I do, TTTXYF pointed out as she shuffled by in costume, making her way to the stage. Piel chuckled. Always the editor, that one, he commented before following my lead to the audience. Kad and Rabs stayed behind. We'll catch up with you guys in a bit, Rabs said, waving as we left. I've got to get ready to act, and Kad looks like she's got her hands full with the lights. I was tempted to use my fast travel trick once again, but to be honest, our seats were only a minute's walk from backstage, so it wouldn't have made much sense anyway. I hoped the storyteller would give me a few asterisks back for my judicious use of resources. As we took our seats, it occurred to me that Piel and I had missed most of the first act. The evil Fuzzles virus had evidently passed through Fairyland already, with Tommy's mother, a surprisingly excellent choice for the role of Queen Fiora, sitting atop her tower sipping tea, watching bemusedly with popcorn and opera glasses whilst her citizens fought off the last of the fuzzy invaders with swords, spears, and hand sanitizer for good measure. At least we didn't miss Tiffany's part, Piel whispered. I'm sure it'll be something. Soon enough, the lights dimmed, and the actors from the first section cleared the stage. A cloud of smoke. Was there a dry ice machine somewhere off stage? Rolled in, bringing the audience to a momentary silence. Then the spotlight faded in to reveal TTTXYF lounging in a pile of leaves and grass, a flower crown angled gently over the scaly ridges in her head. I gulped. I hadn't had the chance to vet TTXYF like I had the other actors, so naturally I was a little concerned about her performance. From the left side of the stage, another actor emerged. Leroy, the Dreadson from the Kelp Funny Club. Oh, fairy of dankness, he began, delivering his lines as if he'd been acting for years. I've returned with the item you requested of me. With a flourish, Leroy removed a small, chia-shaped hedge from the folds of his jacket and placed it before TTXYF. The hissy blinked slowly, observing the gift, then drawled, I don't remember asking you for that. I jumped as the audience laughed. Real laughter, not just the pity laughter that I was used to. Was the joke I wrote for TTXYF really so funny? I thought. Surely, if I delivered that one, it would have flopped. Intrigued, I returned my attention to the stage, where TTTXYF was finally accepting that she'd asked Leroy to fetch her a desk hedge of all things. Guess I'll believe you this time, man, the hissy said, fumbling behind herself to grab a pocket of chips she left on the floor. I appreciate you, like, so much. It was time for Fiora's, Tommy's mom, second entrance. I held my breath. The play was going so much better than I had expected, and I could hardly contain my pride, even if I wasn't the one up on stage. Maybe you have a career in screenwriting, Mikey Co. Before I could gloat too much, the lighting on stage changed. But it wasn't an unexpected transition. The spotlight had gone out all at once, plunging Leroy and TTTXYF into darkness. What happened? I wondered as a murmur washed over the audience. Was there a technical mix-up backstage? Just as I was rising from my seat, a small, much weaker light shone out from between the curtains. It was soon revealed to be a flashlight, clutched between Rab's paws and held between her chin to create an ominous effect as she approached the center of the stage. Alas, she began, shaking her head softly. TTTXYF and Leroy took their cue and vanished backstage under the cover of darkness. With the banishment of the Grass Fairy's quests, Fairyland was plunged into a darkness. The land was no longer able to light up, some might say, but the worst was yet to come. Rabs' flashlight flickered off, and the stage was left completely dark. But then a dim stage light, probably a backup fished from the janitor's closet, flashed to life, showing a new set of actors ready to showcase the next section of Piel's work, the Fairyland Water Crisis. I nodded expectantly. Rabs had turned the technical difficulty into technical advantage, and now for the Water Crisis act, I thought. As if on cue, someone let out an oath of pain. Shortly before a heavy thud, a sandbag had dropped onto the stage floor, scattering its contents everywhere. Before I or anyone else could step forward to fix this, the lights came back on, and I spotted Max covering Timmy's ears to block out the sudden foul language. The tiniest sighs of relief escaped me. Max was certainly good with kids. But the sandbag, that really could have hurt someone, I reflected, careful to roll my way over to the end of the curtain while the audience murmured amongst themselves. It was almost as if the play had come to a standstill. I froze in my skateboard tracks, despite not leaving any. Come on, I whispered. Keep going! The Fairyland Water Crisis! Piel was too far away to hear, but he seemed to understand, and stepped forward into the limelight, oozing confidence as sunny as he was. That Aisha seemed absolutely born for the stage, such that he captivated the audience's attention with his mere presence. Dry as a desert, filled with sand, he declared. From whence shall we obtain our sustenance? I blinked, peering at him as he held the audience's attention just like the pot full of sand. I'd make a joke about this, but I'm not sure if dry humor is for everyone, Piel continued, garnering. Did mine ears deceive me? Several hearty chortles popping out like silly daisies. I hadn't been too confident with that one line, but Piel delivered it so wonderfully there, and... Hold on, where did that violin come from? As Piel fiddled the act away, I returned to my quest, fully aware of the pun losing its strength with every repetition. It really shouldn't have surprised me, but as I reached the end of the curtain, I saw... Kad! Kad, that royal pain in the tuchus, who was still nursing her very blatantly rope-burned paws. My strengths were in the common Neopean language, and not maths, but I could still put two and two together. Sabotage! I hissed in my fiercest whisper that I could muster. You had no right to the rights, she growled, Zafara's voice a stone. I'd won it fair and square, I protested, elbowing her with a fin. I'll show you who's in the right. Before any more scuffling or squabbling or scurrying could occur, another thud. No, it was definitely a bang this time, rang out, followed by a puff of lavender smoke that rapidly spread backstage. From behind the curtain, I could hear the entire audience gasp. My blood would have run cold if I wasn't cold-blooded already. Kad and I declared a silent truce with one glance. We understood that if we were to expose the Fairy Queen, we had to put all our squabbling aside and focus on our common enemy. We both peered through tiny gaps in the bottom of the curtain. Sure enough, there was Fiora, her wings rigid with indignation. Despite the spotlight's direction, I could still make out the mix between fear and reverence in the audience's eyes. Regardless of allegations, the play, or the enjoyment the audience took therein, Fiora was, and still is, their queen, and this was her stage. Surprise, everyone! Fiora's voice was cool, but there was a fierce energy beneath the surface. Thank you for coming to Mikey Co's play. I'm very glad you enjoyed it. Such cordiality, sharpened to a rapier point. I shivered, almost tempted to use the curtain's warmth. So be sure to check out his other work. Her voice suddenly grew bright. Things were quickly moved around on stage, but I couldn't quite make out the type of machine that was being brought out on stage. Technology was moving so quickly, even I couldn't really keep up with it. And what other thing was she talking about? Unless... My stomach dropped. Another beam of light shone in my general direction, the cone emanating from one specific point above the stage spotlights. So, my friend Opulent, a recording began. I gripped the skateboard. How had I gotten a hold of my first gig at Kelp? My absolute flop. I thought recordings weren't allowed in there, except for Max's one. She went apple bobbing the other day, and I think that's just asking for it, seeing that she's a Kiri, or a Kyrie, but you know, I couldn't move. This was going to turn to the worst day ever, and I could do nothing about it. She doesn't pull up someone's dentures, a plushie, or a Fairland Forbid, an apple, but an orange with an apple mask on it. An imposter apple. She fished up an imposter apple. And what do you know, folks? She broke into hives anyway. What was the audience doing? Were they cringing, staring up in pity, getting up and walking away? So, when she tells me this, I have to reply. I simply have to. Orange, you're glad it wasn't a real apple? Several audible groans in the recording's audience. The recording abruptly ended. Be sure to catch this incredibly credible comedian. The emphasis on that last word dripped with sarcasm. I knew she had no faith in my abilities, but this just hurt. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful evening. I turned away from the curtain. This was just too much, and there was no janitor's closet to hide in this time. I had to face the actors I disgraced. It wasn't just me this time. I sniffled. Now, hold on a moment! Kad of all Neopets crawled beneath the curtain and appeared on stage next to Fiora. Why, Kad? Fiora's mouth turned up, but her voice was stoic. What a nice surprise to have you join me on the stage. Enough with this pretense, your majesty, Zafara said, then turned to face the audience. The allegations in Piel's article are more than likely true, but Piel failed to mention something. Kad paused for dramatic effect. The review against the article, you know, the one that was anonymous, it was written in mine own paw, at our queen's behest. Kad! The shock and betrayal on the Fairy Queen's face told more than further explanation could. They told the truth. But Kad went on anyway. Mikey was able to keep going, even after his performance at Kelp. He didn't let failure stop him, but tried a different approach altogether. Why, that Koi discovered new material, battled me for the rights to the material, swallowed his pride and asked a famous writer for help, got talented writers and Kelp's audience to put on a show in record time for you today. If anything, Kad went on, pulling aside the curtain and giving an apologetic look, Mikey here is the one who should be taking a bow today. Silence. It's so terribly hard to get used to when you're on stage. A sound like an ember popping in the fireplace. It was just as unexpected. But then, that sound was magnified, amplified, multiplied as applause bubbled, then erupted throughout the audience. Those without fins stood up on their two or hind feet. Those with fins climbed onto those without, much to their protest. Glancing at Kad, who nodded, I did as suggested. I wobbled on the skateboard and bent over, the whole thing feeling so surreal. The audience kept roaring like a bonfire. As if things just couldn't get more dreamlike, I heard a slight chirping over the din. Next to me was that little Dan fellow, the ferret boy, handing me a cherry pie. On that pie was written an edible, flowing script. Fulfill my Chekhov. I didn't hesitate. The stage barely exploded in laughter and cheers as maraschino cherries dripped down our dear queen's face. After the play concluded and Farah flew off to salvage what she could of the pie, she did like cherry pie, and as the saying goes, waste not, want not, I was surprised to see Leroy, visiting to shake my hand and commend me on the play's success. Congratulations, Mikey Co, he started. What a lovely experience. I mean, truly, that was a grand display of artistic vision. You have a talent for adapting the written word to a theatrical medium. Thanks, I ventured, not too sure how to accept the Dressum's praise. It was a community effort, you know? Yes, indeed. Leroy gave a short nod, then reached into his pocket and fished out a business card. I didn't tell you earlier, Mikey, but I'm a commissioner for the Neopets Council. I spoke with my colleagues earlier, and we'd be happy to nominate your production of the Fairy Queen Conundrum for a Neopet this year. What do you say? What do I say? I couldn't breathe. It was the fact that I'd been out of water for so long, but the thought of being nominated for such a prestigious award was almost too much. I managed to reach out and shake Leroy's fin. It would be my honor.
Warning, asterisk resources low. Welcome, one and all, to this year's Neopets ceremony. I'm your host, Ellsworth, and we've got some great nominees in our lineup tonight. Get ready for the best of the best to duke it out live, folks. Hey, Mikey. The voice belonged to TTTXYF, who was sitting next to me decked head to toe in grass fairy regalia. She seemed to enjoy the spectacle of the Neopets auditorium, packed full of actors and actresses from all across Neopia. You think it's too late to self-nominate for Best Supporting Actress? I thought I was the comedian here, I laughed, ignoring the strange looks the other attendees gave us. But yes, something tells me it's a little too late. Next time, the hissy remarked. Behind her, well, from the seats to her right, where she couldn't see, Piel, Rabs, and Kad shook their heads fervently. The awards ceremony went just about as expected. Ellsworth switched places with another host, Chadwick Woolsworth Tuffington IV, better known as Chadley, about halfway through, retreating to the front row of the auditorium to take a seat besides an Aisha I recognized, to my great chagrin, as the storyteller. Was she here to commend me on my recent storytelling success, or to strike me down for my less than sparing use of asterisks, travel, and quirky, feel-good montages? I guess I'd have to wait and see. And now, we have our next category. I looked up just in time to see the words Best Comedy Special flash across the auditorium's big screen. My stomach churned as the host announced the nominees one by one. This was the moment that that all of us had been waiting for. And the winner is... I took one last breath to steel myself for the inevitable loss. The Fairy Queen Conundrum, a slightly treasonous comedy. I almost started laughing. I almost did. But then I realized the host wasn't joking. Is he for real? I mouthed to the Writers' Club beside me, standing as if on instinct and giving a short bow. Then TTTXYF was pushing past me, muttering something about a sequel, and I had no choice but to follow her up to the stage. The rest of the group, including the members of the Kelp Funny Club who'd played a role in the success of the Fairy Queen Conundrum, followed shortly thereafter. Once all of us had gathered on the stage, it was really quite a large group. I took the mic with only slightly trembling fins. TTTXYF had already claimed the Neopie, and, of course, complimented Chadley for having a name that was almost as long as hers. Hello, is this thing on? I ventured, starting with a classic line from my Comedy 101 textbook. Once again, to my surprise, the remark wasn't met with complete silence. The audience laughed politely before quieting down to hear the rest of my the rest of my acceptance speech. So I'll keep this short and sweet, I continued, looking to my left and to my right at the crew who'd made this moment possible. I want to thank everyone who helped make the Fairy Queen Conundrum possible. I gestured to the crowd gathered on stage, adding, As you can see, there are a lot of us, so splitting up the Neopie might be a real conundrum here. More laughter rang out, wiping away whatever nervousness lingered in my chest. At that moment, perhaps much too late, I realized it wasn't my content that had made me a flop in the past. It was my stage presence. In all my comedic career, I'd been so worried about putting my fins in my mouth that I held myself back from being the real Mikey Co. The Mikey Co. that parents would want their kids looking up to. I remembered what Max told me, that they loved what I wrote because it was just that, real. Though it had taken a convoluted chase and a full-length theatrical play for me to connect the dots, it was about time I finally found my confidence. With that said, I continued, not missing a beat, I'd also like to thank everyone else who supported me as I worked to become a better comedian. My cousin Morty, for one. The cameras briefly panned to Morty in the audience. He was so proud of what I became, and I was proud to have exceeded his expectations when he got me that gig at Kelp. And, of course, my friends Piel, Rabs, Kad, and, Tiffany, Tyranian, Trafalgar. You mean Tiffany, Triumphalante, Torchbringer, Xylobar, 5th! TTTXYV interjected, grabbing the microphone with a free hand. And you're welcome, Mikey. The crowd surged with laughter, partially because of what TTTXYF had said, and partially because of her grass fairy get-up. Either way, I thought that was a good enough ending to my acceptance speech, and took a deep bow as applause and laughter rang out. But then, as I was rising, I remembered someone. The storyteller. Maybe I was pushing my luck here, but I thought I'd tell one last joke while I had the spotlight. Before I go, I thought I'd take this opportunity to test the waters with some new material, I tried. You all know the storyteller, right? I raised a fin to my forehead and looked around the auditorium. I think she's in the audience with us tonight, actually. I looked at the storyteller, who sat with a notebook in hand next to Ellsworth. She appeared surprised, but not too upset that I was engaging her in a comedic bit. Well, I was thinking about it, and I thought she'd make a great comedian. You want to know why? I paused for effect. 'Cause she'll be here all week. Or should I say, all 3 weeks? I was so focused on the audience that I hardly noticed Ellsworth making his way onto the stage, muttering angrily about how I'd offended the storyteller with my last joke. "Thank you, everyone. Have a good night," I called, turning to wave at the star-studded audience. I was just starting to walk away off the stage with the rest of the crew when, slap, everything froze. Mikey Co? More like Mikey KO. Asterisk usage exceeded. Critical failure. You really should have listened to the storyteller, Mikey. The sound of glass breaking. Oh? Hey, what kind of Neopet are you? Have you been reading this whole time? Huh, you kind of remind me of those folks I met in the Lost Desert, just a little less fluffy and scaly. But that doesn't matter now. What really matters is whether you're willing to help me tell my next story. The end. Or is it? We did it! Took like 2 hours, we did it!
Hooray!
Oh, I gotta get up at 5.